The Parents League is a nonprofit membership organization of families and schools, and I can't think of a better example of how we should support our mission through an event like this tonight. So you may ask, what does it mean when a school says that they are a progressive institution? And tonight our panelists will answer this question and more. We will first begin with a brief introduction from each school, and then we will move on to frequently asked questions about progressive education, including questions that you have all submitted prior to the webinar. And we want to thank you for taking the time to submit those questions. And speaking of time, we hope after we've answered all of those questions that we will have some time at the end of our presentation to take a few more questions through the Q&A. So we hope this discussion will provide you with a clear understanding of what attending a progressive school looks like. So let's begin. Anita?
Sure. Good evening, everyone. My name is Anita Haber, and I am the Director of Admissions and Enrollment Management for the Bank Street School for Children. Bank Street is located on West 112th Street and Broadway. We are a co-ed school. We start in the 3s and we end at 8th grade. We have an enrollment of 400 children, and I am proud to say that over 90% will be attending in person in the coming weeks. The School for Children is a program of the Bank Street College of Education, which is well known for its deep knowledge and proven theories of how children grow and develop cognitively, emotionally, and socially. And another point of pride for Bank Street is that 2/3 of our faculty are graduates of the Bank Street Graduate School and are dedicated to the theory and practice of providing an education that begins with understanding and respecting every child. The child is truly at the center of everything we do.
Hello, my name is Dawn Williams. I'm the Director of Enrollment at Blue School. Blue School is located in Lower Manhattan. We have 2 buildings, one for 2-year-olds through 3rd grade, and that is located down in the Seaport on Water Street. And then we have a second building for our 4th through 8th graders, a couple of blocks away on William Street. We have approximately 300 students in our co-ed 2s through 8th grade. We have students coming from all over the city. About 49% of our students commute from Brooklyn. Blue School is a progressive school grounded deeply in inquiry and a fierce belief in building children's voices and children's agency. We believe deeply in the importance of balance and give equal emphasis to the development of academic mastery and self and social intelligence and creative thinking.
Hi, everyone. I'm Elise Mattia, Director of Admissions and Financial Aid at Brooklyn Heights Montessori School. And despite the Brooklyn Heights name, we're actually located in Cobble Hill. In 1965, we opened our doors, but in the late 80s, we did move down to Cobble Hill and spread our wings, and we've been there ever since. We are accredited by American Montessori Society and New York State Association of Independent Schools. We are a co-ed 2s through 8th grade program, fully Montessori from the 2s through 8th grade. And Montessori is an educational philosophy that has been in existence for over 100 years, and you will find Montessori schools worldwide. And a shout out to Maria Montessori. We just celebrated her birth 150 years ago.
I am Mary Young. Good evening. I'm the Director of Admissions at LREI. We are a pre-K through 12th grade co-ed college preparatory school with approximately 600 students. We're located in Greenwich Village. at the corner of 6th Avenue and Bleecker Street. We have been a leader in progressive education since 1921, which means this is our 100th year, which is very exciting. LREI teaches children to be independent thinkers who work together to solve problems. Students graduate from our diverse community as active participants in our democratic society with creativity, integrity, and courage to bring meaning and change to the world.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jesse Trejo, and I'm the Director of Admissions at the Calhoun School. And we're located on the Upper West Side, and we have two locations. We're a preschool. We start with a Young Threes program all the way through the 12th grade. And in our lower school program, what we've affectionately called Little Calhoun, it's located on 74th Street. And that houses our Young Threes program through 2nd grade. And then Big Calhoun, which has the rest of our students, is housed on 81st Street. And one of the things that really is unique about our school, and as similar to our fellow progressive schools here, we are very student-centric, but one of the things that is really special is sort of our no walls flexible spaces. So we have no walls in our main location, and that allows for a lot of flexibility within our classroom spaces and how we really get to do some of the experiential learning with our students.
Hi.
Okay, I'm up. Hi, I'm Elise Bauer, and I'm the Director of Admissions at the City and Country School. We're a co-ed school for 2-year-olds through 8th grade. We're located in 7 brownstones in the West Village on West 13th Street. And one of the highlights of our school is that we're over 100 years old. We're founded in 1914 by Caroline Pratt. And 2 unique aspects of the school I want to share with you. I should say we share the same values of many of the people who have spoken before me, but 2 unique things that stand out for me about my school is our founder, Caroline Pratt, is the person responsible for creating wooden unit blocks. They're used the world over by now, of course, but they started over 100 years ago at City and Country School, and they remain a central material in our nursery and lower school because there's so many things that they offer. They help children express their creativity, be social, develop abstract thinking, collaboration, problem solving, more and more stuff. So we have a very well-developed program using blocks in our nursery and our lower school. The other unique thing about City and Country, I believe, is we have a jobs program that runs through 3rd through 8th grade. And the point of that is for children to take part in the running of the school. And at the same time, they're developing responsibility and community service and embedding a lot of academic skills in a really, really meaningful and practical context. So that's me.
Hi, I'm Pia Kabasinski from Curliers School. I'm the Dean of Students and Director of Enrollment Management. Curliers School starts with our TWOS program, and we are actually starting a toddler program in January. We go through 5th grade. Our focus is young children, and that is something that makes us stand out. That is a big reason why families choose our school, because they are looking for a small community, a tight-knit community that is focusing on young children. And I think one of the things that I always hear from families is that Curliers is a really special place. So those are their words, not mine. We are located on West 15th Street between 8th and 9th Avenue. We have teachers that are committed and know our students really well, and that's also something that makes us stand out. We also have a social justice curriculum that is geared towards the younger ages and is something that we've been doing for a long time and is quite solid. So we're proud of that, and we look forward to getting to know all of you.
Hi, I'm Judy Calixto. I'm Director of Middle School and High School Admissions at the Dalton School. Dalton is a K-12 co-ed school on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. We have about 1,330 students from kindergarten through 3rd grade, through 12th. Our kindergarten through third grade is housed on East 91st Street. Grades 4 through 12 are housed at our recently renovated facility on East 89th Street, and our PE facility is on East 87th Street. Helen Parkhurst, our founder, founded the school, which was not originally called the Dalton School, but believe it or not, was called the Children's University School. Something unique about Dalton is that Helen Parkhurst created the Dalton Plan, which is a methodology in which we deliver education. It's called House, Assignment, and Lab, and I don't want to take up too much time explaining it, so I encourage you to read about it on our website. We are 101 years old this year. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Charles Guerrero, and I'm the Director of Admissions, Financial Aid, and Institutional Research at the Ethical Culture Fieldston School, and I'm also an alum of Fieldston. We are a pre-K through 12 school. We have a main campus in the Bronx, about enrollment of around 1,700 spread across 4 divisions. One unique thing about us is that we actually have 2 lower divisions, one on our campus in the Bronx and then one on Central Park West and 63rd Street on the Upper West Side. Both those lower divisions are pre-K through 5th. We have a discrete middle school and then an upper school. We were founded in 1878 as the Working Man's School in our building, actually. Well, our building on the Upper West Side was our first campus by Felix Adler. One of the things I think that makes us unique is right in our name. We have a very strong rooting in ethics, both as a formal academic subject starting in our lower divisions, but it's also interwoven throughout all of our curriculum from pre-K through 12, and also encompasses service and activism. And it's great to be here with you all tonight.
Hi, I'm Tanya. Thanks for spending time with us this evening. I'm representing Manhattan Country School. We are on the Upper West Side, 85th Street between Amsterdam and Columbus. We have 300 amazing students. We run a pre-K through 8th grade program. We are a co-ed school. We were founded in 1966 by a couple who saw democracy happening all around, people fighting for what they thought was right, and they believed that founding a school where people could come together and learn about themselves and each other would be their contribution to that movement. We are called the Manhattan Country School because we have a working farm up in the Catskills, about 2.5 hours upstate. It is operated by our students. So right now, obviously, they are not up there, you know, feeding the cows and the pigs and the chickens and getting syrup from the trees. But once we return, they will be. And it's nice to spend some time with you all this evening.
I think I'm next. Hi, everyone. I am Diana Lomask. I'm Director of Admission at St. Anne's School. Our name is not helpful, really, in knowing who we are, except that when we were founded in 1965, we were briefly under the aegis of the St. Anne's Episcopal Church, but we are now fully secular, an independent school comprising approximately 1,100 students, preschool 3s all the way up through high school, and we have a teaching, faculty, and administration numbering about 300. We are located in downtown Brooklyn, in Brooklyn Heights, and we are co-ed. Okay, those are all my bullet points. In terms of a few characteristics that are distinguishing, the arts are co-curricular at St. Anne's, which is to say the breadth and rigor of our academic program is matched in the rich offering of the arts program with requirements woven, substantial requirements woven through both domains. I think another feature is the autonomy granted both to teachers and students to craft their own path, and students have early and steadily increasing agency to sort of shape their program around the requirements that they all share. And lastly, I have to mention that St. Anne students never encounter a letter or number grade during their time with us, so that's true all the way through high school. Instead, their teachers are writing detailed, lengthy, and dense narrative reports that speak to their growth through that subject and kind of enhance what we hope through all those different features, build students who know themselves well, develop their own creative capacities, and appreciate those of their peers. And nice to meet you all out there.
Hi, everyone. I'm Shira Silver. I'm the Director of Admissions at the Studio School. We are located on the Upper West Side on 95th Street between Columbus and Amsterdam. And we're a co-ed school with 120 students starting in preschool and going through 8th grade. Our Studio School approach is deeply rooted in academic excellence and scholarship, and relationships are at the center of a Studio School education. Social emotional learning is seamlessly integrated into every single class, every single day. And to this end, we have designed our uniquely studio classes that address both the intellectual and the social emotional aspects of learning. We have a class called One World, which is a uniquely Studio School class, and it blends together the sciences with history, social justice, civics, geography, sustainability, engineering, and technology. And I just wanted to give a quote from one of our recent graduates who was reflecting on his One World class, and he said, "I like to understand what's happening in our world. I have seen so much injustice happen in this year, and we need to work together to create change. Sign petitions, donate, protest, and most importantly, go out of your way to educate yourselves, have conversations, and ask new questions, even if it's difficult to swallow the answers." I think we can all agree with him there, at least everybody on the panel. I look forward to sharing more of our uniquely Studio School classes with all of you out there when you come for your visits, and their names are called Thinking and Writing, Tutorial, Studio Players, and you'll find out what they are soon.
Thank you. Thank you, all of you, for sharing highlights and unique aspects of your schools with our audience. And I know it was hard. You only had about a minute and a half, but thank you. So we're going to move on to the questions, and we're going to start at the beginning with the history of progressive education. And so Judy from Dalton, can you tell us a little bit about the history of progressive education and how progressive education is different from traditional education?
Sure, happy to. I'll try to keep this history lesson brief. So take you back about 100 years ago. And so at the turn of the century, there was a time, it was marked by educational reform. And philosophers, teachers, school psychologists, child psychologists, people like John Dewey, Maria Montessori, Helen Parkhurst, they were educational thinkers, self-described as progressives. Now, these progressives, and there were many more of them involved in this group as well, began to question the wisdom of the day, which held that education was a process of drill and memorization, and that the only way to teach was to regiment children in classrooms. Traditional education had children, and you may have had a traditional education. I know I certainly did, and we turned out all right. There's nothing wrong with traditional education, but traditional education had children seated in rows with a teacher at the front of the room. They couldn't speak to each other. They couldn't move around the classroom. They couldn't even ask questions of the teacher. Imagine not being able to ask questions. Children could only listen to the content that the teacher provided, ingest the content, and then regurgitate it. Their natural instincts to play, to move, to talk, and to ask questions freely was essentially suppressed. So to put it bluntly, progressives felt that traditional education was static and rigid. So progressive educators, their goal was that it was important to remember that it was important for them to develop the whole child. They saw children as social beings, and that schools should be communities where the children could learn together, live and work together, and then also discover their passions and basically enrich, not just the mind, but body and soul as well. So whereas a traditional education was teacher-oriented, it is directed, I should say. A progressive education is student-directed, where discussions, debate, hands-on learning, all of those are the norm in progressive education. It's not so much the content that they're able to recall and spew out, but it's the critical thinking, the creativity, the collaboration, and the independence that are highly valued in a progressive education. You could say that a progressive education doesn't teach a child what to think, it teaches them how to think. And progressive education, you have to remember, at that time was a response to an educational system, the traditional one, that it wasn't working. The progressive thinkers felt that education should respond to American society's changes. And at that time, 100 years ago, there was change everywhere. Socially, political change, economic change, not unlike what is happening in our world today. So in many ways, the model created over 100 years ago seems even more relevant now. So that's your little history moment from progressive education.
Thank you, thank you. So, Elise, what kinds of kids then do best in progressive education?
Well, now we're really getting to the crux of the matter and why you all are here at this fair. And you can hear there are differences among our schools, even though we're all progressive schools, but there are certain types of children that really flourish in these settings. And this is something for you to consider as you're thinking about your children or child. Is your child a self-starter? What do we mean by that? This is a child who's curious. Now, all children are curious, but this is a child who takes their curiosity another step ahead of their peers or in a different, distinct way from children around them. This is a child who will take extra interest in topics and take it further and want to know more and pepper you with questions. Children who are independent, who are thinking outside the box a little bit, and who tend to be driven a little more by internal motivation and their own reward system versus external rewards. Now, all children respond to external rewards, but if they have that inner motivation, a progressive school could be a very good fit for your child. And when they're little, the best word to say, if you have a little busy child, progressive education can be a great fit.
Thank you, Elise. Shira, how can a family best support a child in a progressive school?
Well, I was thinking a lot, Elise, about what you were saying about what children do best, and I think that leads right into what kind of family does best. I think, well, when we opened our doors at the Studio School in 1971, one of our main tenets was that a school is for parents too, and I think that's true at most progressive schools. The homeschool partnership is especially important in progressive schools. Children flourish when parents and schools are on the same page and they're both providing opportunities for children to make their own discoveries and connections as they learn and discover about the world. And it's also important for parents to value the process of learning and not just the product of learning, although the product is important too, but the process and really understanding your child's developmental timetable and how they think and how they learn and what kind of questions to ask them, and working alongside the school and providing your child with opportunities to learn in an open-ended way. And just spending time doing all sorts of wonderful explorations at home, outside, and in the world with your child will continue their learning experiences outside of school. So I was thinking about this question, and I was with one of my colleagues earlier who graduated from the studio school when I was working at the studio school, and now we're working together. And I said to her, you know, what is it that your parents did, and what do you think parents could do to support children in progressive schools? And she said, parents should be the pillars of support to their children without imposing themselves. So sorry for the call. So I very much agree with her. That's my answer.
Thank you. Thank you. Here's a great question. My preschooler loves structure way more than I think I ever did. I'm sure progressive education would be right for me, but how do I know it is right for him? So Dawn, do you want to start off with that?
Sure. First, I want to say I love this question, and I feel the care in it. I appreciate that the parent is focusing on untangling their own response to schools, what may have worked for them or not worked for them, and also the careful focus on who their child is and what their child needs. This feels like such a great way to enter the admissions process. So at Blue School and at so many progressive schools, we love structure. We believe that children and humans need structure, and we know that children thrive with predictability and consistency. So as we're building classrooms in which students are safe and feel deeply seen and known, and where they know that they're welcome and encouraged to bring their full selves and to make lots of mistakes and to ask so many questions, that it is thoughtful structures. For example, in the case of a preschooler, a very clear, predictable schedule, thoughtful community norms, careful rituals around, say, transitions, transparent expectations, careful planning and intentional communication from teachers. All of those structures are foundational in progressive classrooms. And when those structures are in place, children feel safe to explore and inquire, and bring all their identities into the room and make meaning and pursue big questions. And that's the work of our schools. So I think there's something about whether schools sort of look structured, and this idea that the look of structure is maybe desks facing the front. And I know at Blue School, we don't have desks, nor is there a front in the classroom. And maybe there's an expectation that the teacher's voice is the loudest voice in the classroom, which was definitely my experience in school. But when you walk through Blue School, you hear a lot of student voices. You walk into classrooms and you hear that sort of hum and buzz of children sharing their ideas with each other and working collaboratively. And sometimes I think this can, if we're not looking closely, feel like a lack of structure. But I think that in so many of our classrooms, there is actually incredibly thoughtful, detailed, built structure.
Yeah, to piggyback,
Add on to that.
To piggyback on what you're saying, Dawn, I think the way that children perceive it is that they have purpose and they matter, and that's what really drives them to want to be at school and to participate in all those things. And that may be perceived on the outside as a lack of structure, but it's actually really the reality of children having great purpose and impacting the work that's happening in the room, and it also feeding off of the relationships that are there, so that each child knows that my peer matters, my teachers matter, my family matters, even people that aren't in the room matter. So when we're operating in a way of knowing that everyone around us matters in our learning, we can't be structured because life is unpredictable, and more than anything, early childhood classrooms are unpredictable. So as speaking to what you said, Dawn, we have all these plans in place and these structures that are there to support the development of young children. But then they mess it up and we all have fun with it. And that's what makes those classrooms so vibrant, so special, and so full of opportunities to bring kids forward in the amazing ways that progressive schools do.
Thank you. Mary, can you talk a little bit about how diversity is addressed and how it plays out in terms of family composition and curriculum?
Sure, and a timely question, right? So progressive schools have always been committed and deeply committed to diversity and inclusion and reflecting the city around them. We work to create communities that value a range of perspectives. When a classroom includes students with different lives, we experience the truths of others, we learn from each other and become more flexible in our thinking and thoughts about other people. We teach students that their perspective isn't the only perspective or the most valued perspective. We look at diversity through the lens of racial identity, ethnic gender identity, family composition, and socioeconomic diversity. And we strive to represent this diversity in our teaching practices, curriculum, community, faculty, and leadership. And progressive education works with the child's natural inquisitiveness and desire to engage and experiment and question and solve problems. We ask children to grow intellectually, physically, and socially in our classrooms. And our classrooms promote respect for others and an appreciation for cultural experiences that each family brings to the community. We work hard to ensure that our classroom curriculums are inclusive and represent a wide range of truths and identities that exist. We are continuously examining our practices and evolving. We offer affinity groups for students, parents, and faculty. And progressive schools have a commitment to social justice, equity, and activism, and they strive to ensure that every community member has access to the full school experience.
Thank you. Charles, we get this question a lot at the Parents League. And so can you talk about, are progressive schools rigorous enough for my child? And will my child be prepared for their next academic journey?
To briefly answer the question, yes, but to really give it a little bit more color, there's a common misconception that progressive does not somehow equal rigorous, and I think there's nothing that's further from the truth. What you're looking at is a way of learning, and it doesn't necessarily equate to it being easier or in any way less challenging for children and students. What I think, and I think what you've heard a lot here from my colleagues this evening, is that they're really, what we're trying to do is teach children ways to think, ways to problem solve. And one of the things I like to say is that, of course, we're interested in helping them get to the right answer, but we're also really interested in helping them think through deeper questions, right? And to really keep them curious about the things that they're learning and feel invested in their educations. And one of the ways that you do that is by allowing them the space to be active partners in their education. And I think that's a lot of what progressive education is. To give you a quick example, in our second grade class, they were learning about marine life. And one of the children asked, well, how do we know that these creatures that live on the bottom of the ocean, how do we know anything about them? And another child said, well, submersibles. And then another kid said, well, can we build a submarine? So the class changed so that they could research and build a model of a submarine, right? They still learned the information, right? Your children will still learn skills, throughout their careers in a progressive environment. But what we're trying to add on to that is that ability to approach any material and think, how can I learn more about this? How can I do more? How can I, you know, as a product of a progressive education, there has almost never throughout college and in my professional life been a task I have felt intimidated because I felt like I could learn how to do it. And I think that's a big component of a progressive education. And that speaks to some of the questions we have in the chat. I think that's how that foundation plays out and translates into all environments, progressive or non-progressive. You know, it's just so beneficial for them no matter where they go.
This next question kind of is a continuation of how do you ensure that kids get where they need to go? And I know it isn't a race, and yet I want to make sure my child goes to a good college with skills to succeed. Diana, can you comment on that?
Sure. And it does feed really nicely from Charles's answer to the last question, that the emphasis throughout a progressive education is deep engagement on the part of the student, thoughtful engagement in their own education. Most of our schools, you know, kids have real choices, meaningful choices to make about their programs, about the work they do, emphasis on the process, emphasis on not just that product or that right answer, but when you make the mistake, real dialogue about, well, let's unpack it and where did you go wrong? And maybe what did you, what discovery did you make through that process that's actually maybe more interesting than the right answer? And that kind of deep critical thinking, problem solving, and ultimately a real awareness of oneself as a learner is brought right into the process of that transition from the end of high school on to the next step. And, I think, again, I think this would be true at any school worth its salt, as they say, that the adults in that school, in independent schools, have the luxury of knowing their students really well. I think that's prized in progressive school education, certainly knowing the whole person. So a self-aware student and a caring, knowledgeable college advisor with partnership of parents, but they're not driving it. Kids with agency go into a process with an appetite stoked for learning, with real knowledge of themselves as students, a capacity to think critically about what they want to find in that next institution and community. And then they partner with their, as I said, knowledgeable professionals who help them build out a list that involves, aspirations and reaches and likely matches, and that prioritizes things that really matter to that student. And then ultimately, we hope each one of them gets exactly what they want. We hope that they can define what they want according to meaning and content when they get there, and the path that they know how to build for themselves, as well as whatever name of college, so that wherever they end up, they're ready to make the most of it and to go with that paper they got back from a professor that has 1 grade and no comments, and maybe go to office hours and say, I'd love to talk about this, not to argue for points, but to talk about, to engage. So they are really well prepared for that next step.
Thank you. So homework is always the big topic. So Elise, is homework assigned only when it's absolutely necessary to extend and enrich a lesson in a progressive school, or is it assigned regularly as it is in a traditional school?
Well, no and yes, I guess, is the answer to that. But progressive schools can be described as creative and grounded, visionary and practical, and that's how I view homework in a progressive setting. At a progressive school, much of the classroom work is social and collaborative and experiential, and so homework is essential to round out and enhance that experience by developing independence, organizational skills, and responsibility, getting it done, bringing it in. keeping time management, that kind of thing. So with homework at a progressive school, it's an opportunity for students to have time to develop their personal voice and perspective, to challenge themselves and share their knowledge with the group when they come back to school. So it's a balance between the socializing in school and the independence at home and bringing it all together through some homework. So I was going to give a couple of examples of what homework assignments would look like at a progressive school. I know that creating really important and healthy, creating really healthy work habits is important at a progressive school. So an initial homework assignment would be something like asking children to go home and choose a spot that's good for them to do homework. Keep in mind things like noise, privacy, materials, light, distractions, and then to draw that space and to write about that space and why it would be a good place for you to do your homework. So it's all about self-awareness and advocating for yourself and creating a good path for success. And then another homework assignment could be following that. Okay, think about your weekly schedule. Create a weekly schedule for yourself. Think about when you're going to do your homework, what are your after school activities, when are you going to have snack, dinner, when are you going to relax and play, and then what is your bedtime. So again, it's in a self-awareness and having a good sense and being independent. So the idea in general is for homework to be relevant and connected to the classroom work. So children get to, they understand the need to do it, and there's genuine motivation to get it done. So an example of something along those lines would be a group of kids learning about the significance of, say they're studying historical cultures, and they're learning about the significance of artifacts. A homework assignment could be to go home and find the oldest object in your house and then describe its significance. And that kind of example shows how school in a progressive setting can be personalized. We want children to make personal connections and have a real context for understanding what they're studying. And so I think about a quote that our founder, something we live by is facts related are facts learned. And I think that homework is trying to help them create a personal relationship with what they're doing in school in a social way. But of course, homework also provides a way for students to practice and solidify skills taught at school. Things along those lines that come to mind are math concepts, math facts, spelling, vocabulary, foreign language, things like that. Things that with additional practice in a solitary way solidifies those kind of rote skills. And sort of in the end, I think homework is all about creating good study habits, organizational skills that they will take with them as experiences they can draw on for the rest of their lives.
Thank you. What about evaluation? How are students evaluated? Will they receive grades or some other form of assessment? Jesse, can you address that?
Sure thing. And I love this question because I think oftentimes there's a misconception that at progressive schools, the kids are having fun, they're enjoying themselves, there's all play. How do we address what they're doing in the classroom? Are they actually learning? And I think similar to our approaches in pedagogy and curriculum, it's also very much of an individual approach. We are looking at the whole child. And when we say that, we're looking not only at the social and the emotional growth and development of the child, but what is that cognitive growth as well? So what you'll see at our schools, assessment and evaluation will look different. And it's not necessarily to some of the points that Judy brought up earlier. It's different than traditional in that oftentimes we think of evaluation as assessments as being summative tests and cumulative tests that they've taken throughout different semesters. And at our schools, it's a lot more than that, where faculty are really taking a look and really finding opportunities to embed those assessments within the class day and through within the different interdisciplinary projects that the children are participating in. So what we'll get from that is that we're able to see, you know, not necessarily is it that the child is just learning and memorizing different material and being able to spew it out to you, but are they able to develop their writing skills? Are they working on their research skills? And what we'll see is that we'll be able to give formalized feedback. And when that formalized feedback, it also takes different forms. So at many of our schools, we'll give feedback and narrative anecdotal information in some of the earlier years. One of our partner schools actually gives some more of that anecdotal feedback throughout the course of the years. But what that information is really able to hone in, what are the skills that the child is really good at and doing well? Where are the areas for growth that they can continue to improve upon? And less about, okay, did they remember the date that the Constitution was signed and the Declaration of Independence, and more so those skill sets. So the way that looks like, and when you're thinking about evaluation, is, let's say, for instance, at Calhoun in first grade, our students work on a mammal project. And with that, we're able to hone into their different passions, and they get to pick a mammal where they really look at and they become scientists, they become researchers. So they're working on their writing skills, they're working on their research skills, and they later present that to the community where they're able to then show and the mastery of what they learned and not just spew out what they read. Similarly with our upper school students, we have something that we call Junior Workshop, where essentially we challenge our students to create something new. And what that's led to is different projects where, you know, one year we had a student who she wanted to create a documentary where she was analyzing mental health within the prison system and some of the fallout from that. And what that does for the student is that you start with what they're passionate about and seeing how they're applying those skill sets to the work they're doing, as opposed to just setting aside sort of strict formulaic responses to did the child write a 5-paragraph essay, did the child tick this box, and more so how they're able to engage in their thinking. And to that point too, you know, all of our schools also have very regular and weekly, and in most cases, faculty meetings where we're having a lot of those conversations about each and every child. And again, it's the whole child, so it's not just how did they do in this assessment, but are there some things that we can help that child and foster growth within their development as a social beings and community members? So similar to our whole approach, it is holistic and it looks different at many of our schools, but it's not just sticking to the child got an A. It's beyond what does that A mean for those of our schools that does assign grades.
Thank you, Jesse. So, you know, we are just kicking off the admission season. So, Anita, can you talk a little bit about admissions and the application timeline, process, and admissions application review process and testing?
Okay, I'll try. There's a lot here. And I do have some notes. So if it looks as if I'm looking down, it's because I'm referring to my notes. And what I would like to preface all of this by saying is that there's nothing uniquely progressive about the admissions process. We all aim to be as family friendly as possible and make this as easy and smooth a process for families, because we know that this is not, this can be a time when families do get a bit anxious, shall we say. So we try as much as we can to just embrace the process and see it as an adventure in many ways. And I also want to say that this is going to be a very different year. It's different for everybody in every aspect, including the admissions season. For almost all of us, as far as I know, every event, every component of the admissions process will be virtual. There will be very few schools that I am aware of that are having prospective parents and children in their buildings per se. First, I'm just basically going to be giving you some broad strokes. I think we all know what the admission season entails, and it begins on Labor Day. There are some schools that actually do invite prospective parents to submit applications in August, but for the most part, the season begins the day after Labor Day, and even for those people who've submitted applications before Labor Day, nothing can be done in terms of scheduling appointments or interviews and that. But in fact, right after Labor Day, admissions offices are beginning to schedule parents for parent interviews, children for assessments, and so forth. And again, all of this will be conducted remotely. The application, you must apply first. The application is the #1 item before any visits or interviews can be scheduled. A majority of schools, Bank Street is not one of them, are now using the Ravenna application, which is similar to the Common App that is utilized by many universities and colleges. The application deadline varies according to each school. I would say for the most part, and I didn't research every independent school in the city, but a good number of schools have December 1st as their deadline. There are some schools, one in particular, that has a deadline of September 25th. And it goes like that. But by the end of submission of applications, we're almost coming towards the end of the admissions season. So what is involved in the process? There's, for the most part, again, broad strokes here, for the most part, there is a parent interview, there is a visit by the child. Again, it's being done remotely. There are several schools in the city that are using the T&E, which stands for the Thinking and Engagement Activities Assessment. And if you're a parent who is applying to several of these schools that are utilizing the T&E, your child only has to be scheduled once for this assessment. And for those schools that are not using the T&E to assess children, they each have their own way of evaluation, observing, and assessing. I would say for the most part, the assessment of the child, because it is on Zoom, does not go much beyond 30 minutes because we're talking about very young children being on a screen, and even 30 minutes can be a lot for them. Other forms of testing currently in the city, I'm not sure there are any schools that are using the ERB. There may be some other standardized tests that schools are using. You'll have to check the school's website to see what forms of assessment they are utilizing. And then with almost all schools, the parent interview is a big component of the process. Almost all schools want to meet you, the parent, to learn more about you, to learn more about your family, and certainly to learn more about your child. The last piece of the process is the ISAGNY confidential report. And this is a report that is filled out by the feeder school where the child is currently attending. The confidential report for entry into kindergarten and first grade is a rather lengthy report. It's 18 pages long. And the report for younger children is much shorter. It's 4 pages. These reports are completed I would say conscientiously by either the teacher or the director of the feeder school, and they usually begin coming in around the beginning of December. January 8th is the deadline for receipt of the confidential report. And then there are some other events that you should be aware of during the admission season. Almost every school has one or more open houses. And one of the big changes with this year is the fact that all tours of the school facilities will be done virtually. And then in terms of the actual admissions decisions, schools that are members of ISAGNY abide by specific notification dates established by the organization. This year, schools will notify their kindergarten applicant families by, in the beginning of February, and nursery and pre-K families will be informed at the end of February. And decision-making in general is, specific to each school. Schools have admissions committees. The composition varies according to the school. And almost all schools are needs blind when making admissions decisions. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Anita, for that, the comprehensive admissions timeline. And if there are any families who are applying to middle and high school and want to learn more about the admissions process in depth, the Parents League are hosting an admissions panel on Monday, this coming Monday, the 21st, which will kick off our fair. And finally, we really want to address financial aid in our school. So Tanya, I leave
Sure.
it to you. Thank
Yeah, great. I too am reading some notes, so there's a lot of information to communicate, and I want to make sure I don't miss any of it. One thing that's, I think, really important to note about financial aid is that this is a system that benefits both parties, your family and our schools. We are able to ensure that we have the best and the brightest and students that we feel are the best fits for our school by having having financial aid available. So that just felt important to note. And just to kind of reiterate what we've heard, each school is unique. We have our own financial aid process and deadlines, and I strongly encourage you to keep track of those dates and the processes involved. There are about 4 aspects of the financial aid process that I really want to highlight. 1, start to gather your financial documents. You're going to want to collect your W-2s, your federal tax returns, your recent pay stubs. If you have any particular additional incomes that are coming in, make sure you are beginning to collect all of that, because part of the process will require you to submit these forms to submit these documents along with the form you will complete to a third-party management system. And typically our schools are using something called TADS, another one is called FACS, another one is called SSS. If you apply to 2 different schools that are using SSS, for example, you would submit it only one time to SSS, and they would then distribute the information to both of those schools. Sorry, just reading through my notes here. What the third-party management system is going to do is to gather all of that information and then send the schools a report that is going to sort of shorten all the particulars of your financial situation, and it will send to the school an amount of tuition that should be manageable for your family based on your particular financial situation. So it's important to know that these are all very much based on your particular circumstances. Another thing that I want to highlight is that while each school will have a slightly different process for awarding financial aid, typically the process starts with, as Anita was starting to talk about, the admissions committees will make decisions, and oftentimes we'll then pass along to a financial aid committee, here are a list of students that would be really, really excited to have join our community. And then those committees begin to distribute money based on sometimes just very particular things. This year we have, 58% of our school population are female identified, and the remaining are male identified. And we'd like to balance out those numbers a little more. So perhaps one particular year, students who are female identified might get money in a year that, should the numbers be reversed, they might not. It's not across the board, it's not a hard rule, but it's just sort of the insides of the process. Something I like to always make sure parents know is that at the point that you receive an acceptance, congratulations, you will also get a financial aid award. And most of our schools have processes for appealing those decisions. So sometimes at the point at which you filled out the form, something has happened in your family that we're not aware of. Maybe you have some additional medical bills that you have accrued. So there's often the opportunity to appeal the decision. Again, why you must have financial documents. Most of our schools will ask for some additional information when we are considering granting appeals. And fourth thing that I want to note is no matter which school you end up enrolling in, you will have to do this process every year. So every year you will resubmit your financial aid form, and the financial aid committee will make a decision. Assuming that there are not real changes in your family's financial situation, you can assume that that tuition will remain relatively the same, or the financial aid will remain relatively the same. Most of our schools increase tuition about 3 to 5% per year, so you will see slight increases. It's something to begin thinking about in terms of your budget. So while I've said all of this, I do want to take a moment to note that at Manhattan Country School, we are one of the few schools in New York City that use a sliding scale tuition model. And that's really based on the principle that families' financial commitment should be an equitable proportion to their financial resources. So we ask all of our families to complete the same financial form. It's called a family financial worksheet. If a family has been blessed with a lot of financial resources that put them well above what our tuition is, we will ask them to make a contribution to the school, because again, it is important to us that everybody is equally participating in the education of their child. I mentioned the worksheets. Most schools, the deadline for these financial aid forms, they must be submitted by December 15th. For us at Manhattan Country School, it's December 1st this year. And that's pretty much it. It can seem like an overwhelming process, but trust that we are thoughtful about what we're doing, and we are available to answer all of your questions. There is a question here about how do we address socioeconomic disparities? And one of my colleagues mentioned earlier that oftentimes when we give awards, we assume that that amount will cover other areas. So should there be an overnight trip, or should your child join an athletic team and there are additional expenses you would incur, typically schools will give you the same percentage that has been covered in tuition towards that additional cost. And I think that's a very beginning of the financial aid process, but we'll end it there.
Thank you, thank you. So we are already a little bit over, but maybe we can take a couple of questions that came in through the Q&A, if the panelists don't mind staying on for a few more minutes. So some of the questions I believe we answered, but there was a question about, is progressive education only for the self-advocating, and how are students who are shy motivated in this environment? So would anyone like to take that question?
I would love to, as the mother of a shy child. I think that progressive education actually asks children to speak up, and many of the projects that we do ask children to do presentations, and you know, in making a well-rounded child, I wanted that for my child. I wanted her to have that experience so that she'd be prepared to go out into the world and really stretch that bandwidth for her, and give her a lot of experience in that, so that when she was put on the spot, she could be more fluid and present, and I think progressive schools do that. I also think they take into consideration that the child who's at the front of the class raising their hand and answering all the questions, they're going to ask that child to start to listen a little bit more and take a beat and let's hear from somebody else. So again, there's an equity in how we manage classrooms and listen to children and ask children to have a voice. We may say to one child, you know, I'm going to ask you a question today, and here's the question, get your mind ready so that when I call on you, you're prepared. And that sometimes helps children to better manage it, like a whole group meeting versus a small group meeting. There are lots of strategies for helping children who are a little more reticent than others, for sure.
Does anyone want to add anything?
I mean, I'll just quickly say that I think, you know, from my experience and from my time, you know, at school, you know, we can, I think there's a broader sort of swath of children who can do well in a progressive environment. I think, you know, just being shy is no barrier at all. I think what we really are looking for is that and are willing to do some collaborative work, that they do have a curiosity, because I think that makes the process easier. But not every child, we admit, is, you know, effusive and you know, an extrovert and things. Quite the opposite often. So I think, you know, again, shy children can do really, really well in progressive environments, and they can help them sort of, you know, expand their boundaries a little bit.
I just wanted to add that I think most of our schools are looking for all different kinds of personalities and learners, because I think that adds to the dynamics of a community.
I don't know if I'll just quickly add that when children are able to connect to things that they love, shy or not, you're going to find that they have a lot to say. And whether it's a lot to say in a piece of art that they produce, or a lot to say in a dance piece, or in some music that they've composed, children are excited about things that are personal to them, things that excite them, they will then want to share with others. So I would just add that.
I think just adding on, there's a way in which our schools feel like real communities where children feel like they are at home. They feel like this space is theirs, that the relationships are meaningful to them. I know we think a lot about, we start with 2-year-olds, and starting with that teacher who's on the floor with children, asking them what they're doing, being really curious about how they're seeing the world and how they're approaching the world, that relationship starts between the child and their teacher. And then once that trust is developed, the teacher can say in a morning meeting, can you tell your friends what we were talking about this morning? So I think children their voices start sort of amplifying as they feel more at home and they feel more safe and seen. And our schools are sort of built for that feeling of home in those classrooms.
Thank you. So what kind of feedback, I'm sure you all talk to your alums, and what kind of feedback do you receive from graduates of your progressive schools? And do you ever hear that they wish their high school experience or something different about their high school experience? Or, you know, I would love to hear a little bit more about feedback from your graduates.
I can take a first stab at this question. And I think one of the
overwhelming feedbacks, I think that, for Calhoun, but also for all of our schools and Don was just sort of touching on this, is the amount of community and relationships that were able to be built at our school. So essentially the strength of being able to self-advocate with faculty members and being able to reach out and ask for help when needed, and how that served them well once they graduated our schools and went off to their next learning environment. So that really allows them to grow and take sort of charge of their own education process. And that's one of the biggest things. And I think the other piece is just how much we've been able to fuel their passions as they learn, and finding different ways that they were able to, as Tanya mentioned, be outspoken in their own sort of creative avenues, whether that was through a public presentation or another form, whether it's art or something else that they wanted to take on while they were with us.
If I could just add to that, to what Jesse was saying, what we hear from our graduates, and I don't know, you might all remember starting off at college, and I remember going to this huge university and being just completely intimidated of a professor's office hours. That is not the case with our students. They seek out the faculty. They are unafraid and unintimidated of asking questions, and that self-advocacy takes them through their college experience, through grad school, or any other additional education that they pursue, and even in their jobs. They go out in the world and they are really just unafraid to advocate for themselves and advocate for what they don't know, and to get answers. They're always looking for answers, and I think our schools prepare them so well to continue that, and just to do it as just a matter of course. It becomes ingrained in them. The other one piece that we hear from our graduates is that they wish they had an extra year, so they could have taken all those other extra electives that really pertain to their passion that they developed in our schools.
I would like to add also that a number of our parents are alums of Bank Street. So I think that that's proof right there how much they loved and valued their experience. And we've heard from so many alums how Bank Street has informed who they are today. And recently I met with a parent who applied to Bank Street, an alum, who said that after Bank Street, she went to Stuyvesant. And then after that, she went to Haverford College. And when she got to Haverford, she said, it's Bank Street all over again. And that's, her love, her passion for the kind of learning experience that she had. And the one thing I'd also like to add, and to piggyback on what we were saying earlier, is that I think children, whether they're quiet or have a lot to say, that the one thing that we can all say about our schools is that we allow children to be who they are, to feel safe, to be embraced, whether they're quiet, whether they're out there. These are safe spaces, and the children feel it, and it's okay to be quiet too. So.
And I like to take that question, but flip it a little bit and not think about like alums, people who've gone through the program and have left us. How about children who join us kind of midway from a different setting? That's always particularly interesting because it's children who've been typically been in a different kind of a school, and they get to a progressive school and you hear things like, my child finally loves school. I used to go to school and it was fine, but now I really want to come to school. And that kind of thing. There's a connection that new children feel, a freedom and an excitement that they feel. And parents will often say, my child has really come out of their shell, that kind of thing. And so that's the way I'm thinking about this theme myself.
Well, thank you, everyone. I know it's a school night, and so I think we are going to wrap it up because I know you all have to report very early to school tomorrow. But I want to thank all of you for participating tonight, and I hope our audience learned more about what it means to be a progressive school. I know some of the things, the common things that they'll find is all of you, you're wonderful educators, but community, collaboration, attention to the whole child, social justice, active learning, all of those. And I do hope that you all will go and visit our progressive schools. And I want to particularly thank Jessie Trejo for the creation of this event and organizing this event. Thank you so much, Jessie. And please, if we didn't get to your questions, email the Parents League at info@parentsleague.org, and we will get the answer to you, or sign up and become a member and speak to one of our advisors. We have all been in these wonderful schools, have visited these wonderful schools, and we're eager to tell you a lot more about them. So thank you all. Good night, and good luck to everyone as you embark on this admissions process this year.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Gina.
Night.